Sarah, I'm keen for you just alongside Debbie and Chris, just maybe if there's questions, but perhaps I could kick off with one, conscious as well, as Debbie, chairing the resilience work and sustainability work within the city. But in terms of the importance of resilience and the context of at that individual and community level, because a lot of the time, we talk about resilience, that it's about how we're doing to people to develop resilience. But I think the conversation has more moved to how we help people to gain the tools to bring about the resilience, to bring about change, but also the importance of language in behaviour change. So maybe that's just a couple of things, just in thinking around the resilience and the learning of skills to bring that change, but also importance of language. So maybe just them couple for you, Sarah, just as before I would maybe ask Debbie and Chris a question.
So I suppose that the term resilience is kind of an interesting one, because I suppose when we talk about it in some of Debbie's context, it's a bit different than in some of my contexts, would be, which are about I suppose developing internal and individual skills around resilience, and then the challenge of having sort of system resilience in terms of that, and the importance of both. I think actually from my kind of understanding of kind of Debbie's word, etc., probably system resilience is much better in terms of thinking about those kind of climate systems that are set up to function in that. Whenever we think in healthcare in terms of resilience, actually we probably don't do as well in terms of the systems resilience. We have a bigger focus on individual resilience. So there's probably something in terms of actually learning from each other in slightly different focuses. I think one of the challenges of the terminology of resilience is it can be a bit of a backlash on that, because there is a perception of this is all about me and what I can do, but actually this is about the systems and the organizations in which we live and how we build resilience into those. I don't know if that answers your question, and you're on mute.
Yeah. Yes, it does. I suppose one of the things is that, and which will probably come up in the workshops, is that there'll be huge expectations for communities to be able to help towards climate change and things that need to be done, and also around addressing poverty. But one of the things is that sometimes we're not very good at helping people to have the tools that they need to help them to bring about that change. We expect them to be able to, if we're speaking to them directly, to understand it. So it's about the simplicity of language. And I suppose there's one of the, I see David Bobbington has put up there actually, is there any one behaviour that consistently stands out in supporting successful behaviour change?
I wish I knew the answer to that, David, because I kind of feel that I could probably then retire and sell that. So I wouldn't be telling you. But no, I don't think so. It's the kind of, I think that the challenge with behaviour is that it's complex and it's made up of so many different aspects that influence it. And so it's actually making sure that we are approaching it from these various angles and keeping in mind the different ways in which behaviour is enabled or in which it is sabotaged almost as well, So I say if I had the answer to that question, I'd be bottling it and selling it in wee packages out there. So I will continue to look for it, and if I find it, I'm happy to sell to the highest bidder. But I think we need to, it is about the really us remembering how complex we are, not just the systems in which we work, and you only have to listen to kind of Debbie and Chris's presentations in terms of the complexity of the influence in terms of poverty and climate change, but the complex system that we are as individuals. If you think of that kind of brain function, etc., I mean, that's the excitement of the work that we all do in terms of system and individual complexity, but it's also the challenge of it as well.
Okay. Thanks very much, Sarah. So Debbie, just in terms of the question for yourself there, that there's been lots of media attention around the climate crisis and net zero, But do the communities who will be most impacted know what they can do to help reach these targets? And what can be done to engage the public more effectively?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and I think COP26 has done a lot to build that awareness. But what I worry about is, and this goes back to Sarah's presentation, where we had those circles with and I think a lot of the language around the climate change agenda is sitting squarely in the red circle in terms of the threat language. And one thing that struck me, we did a survey on our Your Say platform of young people around climate change, and then we had a youth climate summit, and a lot of people, that language has caused a lot of really young people to feel despondent and depressed, to the point where people are actually having mental health issues about it. And I think we have a responsibility, for anybody working in the sector, and anyone in the media has a responsibility to make sure that the language that we're using is really measured and looking at potential opportunities that there are. And we need to be moving into that blue circle, the drive circle, where we are kind of engaging our communities in a very bottom-up approach to make sure that they feel they're part of the solution. Because I think a lot of people are feeling that these initiatives are done to them rather than with them. And I think it's that process. We have to start engaging communities in a more constructive way, and not using scare tactics all the time. And quite often the scare tactics are sort of directed at the politicians, but the kind of unintended consequences is causing a lot of alarm with our young people. And that's really worrying. And we need to make them feel like there is hope and that there is still time to do something. And I certainly feel really positive about what can happen in Belfast. And I think there is a lot that we can do to build awareness more widely and have a more constructive debate about climate change and all that needs to be done. But I do think we're sort of at the start of that journey, and it's certainly something that we want to focus on and engage with yourselves on as much as we can. I hope that answers your question. Bit of a long-winded reply, sorry.
Thank you, Debbie, and I'm sure there'll be much more in the workshops later. But I suppose, Chris, just a couple for yourself, because I'm conscious of time, and just a couple of questions, and then we will hear from John Tully from the Community Planning Partnership. Just in terms of a see up on the messages there that you had said about ending poverty is a choice that we need to make, and that being such a great statement, but just wondering if you had saw any evidence of that being taken on board and moved forward. And also maybe, Chris, about how you highlighted interest in grassroots local initiatives in Scotland that amplified people's voices in the developing solutions. And while there are examples of this locally, one of the questions we have is, what could we be doing here in Belfast to ensure that we secure the clear protections of our mitigations package, and how we can improve our mitigations? So that's a couple just for yourself, Chris, just before we would hear from John.
Yeah, a couple of nice easy ones there. I mean, I think the choice thing for me, I mean, JRF have done some work around this around framing our language and looking very carefully at how we push messages. And one of the things that we would say, a bit like what Debbie's just said, and it all goes back to Sarah's thing about, I don't know why, if you're a young person watching COP, it just looks terrifying. So all these politicians who hold so much power saying we're all screwed if we don't do anything, and then not doing as much. Why that's just such a kind of an obvious turnoff for people. So I think it's one of the things with what we say, I've worked very closely with politicians for years. They're all, despite some of them, all human beings as well. and you know, they have different motivations and think in different ways, and I think, but we do see changes that, you know, I think the mitigations of Social Security are really good examples of that. You know, they were cast in some pretty hot fires, you know, but they were all coming from a position where you could look at the impact that policy choices made in Westminster were happening in communities in the North, and agreed to do something again about that in pretty challenging political circumstances. So I think that's the thing, is we often, you know, we get caught up in chasing, frankly, quite right-wing newspaper attitudes of, you know, particularly around poverty. Oh, it's individuals' faults, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You know what? The vast majority of people on the left and right and every other divide in politics don't think like that. We know that there's a role for our public sector, our communities, our businesses, etc., to play. And you know, as humans, there's a really good book kicking about. I think it's just called Humankind. It's by a Dutch academic called Rutger Bregman, and he basically concludes that, yeah, of course, there are some people who are heroes who just go out of their way to do fantastic things, and there are some people who are scumbags. But the vast majority of people are just all right. We do give a monkeys about what's happening to people around us. We obviously care most for our family and friends, and that's fine. And so we do that. I truly believe, or I wouldn't do my job, that there is a collective interest in people achieving big goals like reducing poverty or meeting the climate challenge, because we do all care about the impact on what's happening around us. It's why, I mean, I was in the Scottish government when we were talking about lockdowns at the start of COVID, and there was a big part of thinking, it was like, people won't accept that. Nobody's going to stay at home. And it's like, well, actually, people took, you know, nobody wanted to be locked in the house all the time and took those decisions. So I think if we do focus people on the positive changes that can happen, and I think the mitigations and how you protect those within your own community are a really good example of that. You know, things like the 5-week wait for universal credit are an atrocious attack on people's lives. This idea that we're going to prepare you for the world of work by putting you into destitution for a month is bizarre. Yet people have fought against that from across the political spectrum. I think that's really positive, because we can understand and see the obvious harm that that will do to individuals. So I think, yeah, I think trying to scare people and shouting at people and calling them stupid, I don't think that gets anyone anywhere. So how we can positively sell the change and the positive change that, yeah, you might not be living in poverty yourself, you might be lucky, but that you can see the value in how your community being more equal and being more resilient in whatever sense is a positive thing to you as an individual as well.
Thanks very much, Chris. And just like to take the opportunity to thank yourself and Debbie and Sarah for your excellent presentations this afternoon, and hopefully you're able to stay with us. But it's been really excellent to have you here with us this afternoon to inform discussion and work that we need to do moving forward. So thanks very much.